Shavua Tov, everybody. I hope you guys had a beautiful, happy Shabbat. Um, this class is actually, well, I hope it's an aliyah of the neshama for Yehuda Aryeh Raphael ben Yita, passed away this past week. Fortunately, he had asthma, and when he got the COVID, because it affects the lungs, his respiratory system shut down. So a lot of people were praying for him. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. Zot Hashem, this class should be an aliyah of the neshama for him. And obviously it's a hard thing. And I hear this. I remember when I was becoming Baal Tshuva, and I asked why there was poverty in the world to one of the rabbis. So I think it was a Rebbitzin, actually. She told me it was so that people who have money should appreciate it. And I had a very hard time with that somebody else should suffer so that you should appreciate. But obviously, as time has gone on, I've learned a lot more. What you see is actually a reflection of what's going on inside of you. That's not to say that the person doesn't exist. They do exist. They have their life just as important as yours is. But in some sense, whatever you see is really for you. And so therefore, when people like this, when they get sick, when they pass away, the one positive is it's a very keen reminder how precious life is, how precious health is, how precious having people that you love in your life is, and how nothing is guaranteed. And, Rabbi Nachman says that it's a sur, it's forbidden to get old. He said it's forbidden to be old as a chassid, it's forbidden to be old when you're young, it's forbidden to be old when you're a child, it's always forbidden to be old. So what does he mean it's forbidden to be old? He means that the concept of old, or that things are the same, is exile. The thought process that things are just like they were yesterday, that my problems are the same as they were yesterday, that my strengths and my opportunities today are the same as they were yesterday, so are my challenges. So this all comes from Galut. This all comes from a spiritual exile. And our consciousness tricks us into thinking that today is exactly the same. Well, here we go. We have another class that we're coming to hear David speak again for an hour straight without stopping. So that might feel like, every week, same old. But the real truth is, according to Torah, especially according to Kabbalah and Chassidut, this moment is brand new. There's never been this moment in history. There will never be this moment again. And whatever you have right now is new. You could see right now, that's new, even though you could see before, because Hashem is actually causing you to see right now. Not that he gave you eyes that could see in the beginning, and then as time goes on, they'll start to wear out. But that Hashem is consciously, actively deciding, should you see right now or not? This is why, unfortunately, you'll see sometimes a person will wake up one day and say, wow, I can't see, something happened. Because Hashem is not allowing things to just take place, stam. They are an active decision on Hashem's part at every moment. When a person realizes that it's from Hashem, this is the beginning of him leaving his state of oldness. Because he realizes that Maaseh Bereshit Tamid, that Hashem is recreating the world at every moment, okay? Now, this class was actually inspired by one of our students. She's one of our very dedicated female students who is not here locally, but she's national. And she encouraged me to teach about, like last month, how we did, what was the, so to speak, the spiritual essence of the month, and what is the thing that we should be working on, or we have a greater ability to connect to and to work on now, like we did last month, where we did Tevet, which had to do with the eyes and had to do with Bitul. Okay, so this month is Shvat. Shvat is the new year of the trees. There's two different opinions going back to the sages of when the new year for the trees is. Some people say it's the 15th, which is Rav Hillel, right? Beit Hillel says the 15th. That's when we actually do, because we always paskin according to Beit Hillel. And then there's Beit Shammai who says it's on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, which already passed. Okay, now, great, wonderful. So there's a new year for trees, great. Okay, but the truth is, it's very deep. Because in Kabbalah, in the Zohar, and Rabbi Nachman speaks about this in a few of his Torahs, that the trees always represent the tzaddikim. And that in Gan Eden, where you had grass and you had trees and you had branches and you had fruit and you had dirt, and you had this and you had that. They're actually all physical manifestations or spiritual entities which reflect the Jewish people. Some of them are those people who are the true tzaddikim that we're going to learn today that he is the Eitz HaChaim, he's the tree of life. And then we have, so to speak, forces which manifest as the Eitz HaDa'at Tov Ra, the other tree which is trying to interrupt and interfere with you eating from the tree of life, which confuses you. And that's why it has both good and bad. You also have the grass, which Rabbi Nachman says, all the grass is corresponding to all the souls of the Jewish people, and so on and so forth. So therefore, the new year for trees really means the new time period that you can connect in a deeper way to tzaddikim. And specifically, in this month of Shvat, that you should connect to yourself to the archetypal tzaddi, because the month of Shvat, each month has a letter. The letter from last month is Ayin. Okay? This letter Ayin actually refers to the eyes. That's why Ayin is the first letter of Einayim, eyes. Okay? This has to do with sight. It actually, if you look at it, kind of looks like a little alien with like a little swervy body and two eyes on the top. You guys ever notice that? No, just me? Paul Chuba syndrome? Okay. So now if you go a little bit further though, this month is the Tzadi. You guys ever notice what a Tzadi looks like? Almost the same, except it's bent over, which is referring to some level of humility. However, we know that there's a final Tzadi, that at the end of the Hebrew alphabet, there's a Tzadi that is actually completely straight. That looks very much like a tree. And the month of Shvat, we're able to tap into the true essence of a real tzaddik. Because during the year, we all sort of poo-poo at it. That what would be much more exciting for me would be to find a new BMW, or to get that house that I want, or to hang out and to mingle with certain of the other gender. Yeah, so this would be exciting for me. This would be like the greatest moment of my day if I could do one of these things today. Okay, so all of this pales very much in comparison to what the Zohar teaches is the Eitz HaChaim. That is the tree of life. The tree of life in Gan Eden represents the source of all godliness which is revealed in the world, which is the source of all good, because it says, taste and see that Hashem is good. How does a person taste and see that Hashem is good? Hashem is not physical. So we need to be able to have a reflection of godliness, something that we can handle, that we can experience. This comes through tzaddikim. Now, during the year, and specifically during the exile, there's not much respect for tzaddikim, unless you're Sephardic, okay? But even amongst them, the respect might be like one of these, and then I go in my car and I go to the club right after. So that's not the same type of, kavod that eventually when Mashiach comes, we're going to have, because we're going to see that eventually, like right now, when we look at celebrities, we're like, oh my gosh, he's so tan. Oh my gosh, look at that jawline. So when Mashiach comes, this will not be the same type of, things that excite us. That in fact, when Mashiach comes, it won't be the presidents. It won't be the kings and queens of London. It won't be the celebrities in Hollywood. It will actually be all the tzaddikim that we're running after. But right now, because Hashem is in exile, so those people who are most connected to him automatically go into exile. And you don't care about them. You're not interested in them. They don't seem like they're that much of a benefit to you unless you're really struggling and you have to go get a bracha. You have to go get an eitzah. However, in this month, Shvat is reflective of the tzadi when it's full, when it's long. That long tzadi, the one that is like a tree, represents the tzaddik at the end, after the geula begins. Okay. Now, in every month as well, just like last month, we said, what's the chush of the month? What is the sense of the month? So we said the sense of the month is something called bitul. That is that I'm nullifying what I see in my life, right, with the eyes, because we said that the whole entire challenge in this world is most expressed through the eyes, because there's nothing that's more misleading in this world than what things look like. Not only, let's say, opportunities that you thought would be a certain way, or that someone you're dating was a certain way, or that your life would be turning out a certain way and it's not, that your circumstances are dictated in some way, but in truth, this is not the way you hoped for. It doesn't look good, but my teachers are telling me that it is good, but it doesn't feel good, but they say it's from Hashem, so it is good. So what's the whole reason? Because the Zohar says that this world is Amad Shikra. This is the world of lies. Where are the lies most experienced? The lies are experienced in the eyes. That's for Gedalia Benster over there. Benny, did you hear that one? Are you on there? Okay. The lies are in the eyes. That was last month. How do you rectify those lies of the eyes? I feel like Dr. Seuss right now. How do you rectify those lies of the eyes? You need to close them. So we said that the only way you could see in truth in this world is to actually close your eyes. And this is the reason why when we say Shema, we close our eyes. Because we are proclaiming, we are establishing the fact that we believe more in what we know to be true than what we actually see with our own eyes. Okay? Now this month, it's not sight. This month is everybody's favorite. Eating. The sense of eating. Kid's happy over here. Thank God. So, oh, he's eating, that's why. Gotcha. You have shashlik over there? What is that? No? Cheese doodles? That was a big letdown. Okay. So I'll tell you as a kid growing up, even more so than like, let's say my friends, I had a very deep obsession and compulsion with eating. Even as a kid, I used to always have to have something on my mouth. I would always put like a blanket on my mouth, even though I wasn't doing anything. It was just on my mouth. It used to drive my brother insane. He's like, yo, that's disgusting. Take that off your mouth. I used that blanket. But I couldn't stop because I had to have something in my mouth. That's probably why I can't stop talking either. I always have to have something going on in my mouth. Maybe that's also why I enjoy praying. Thank God. But it also leads to negative things. That is, sometimes you fill your mouth with oral fixations that are not good for you, like drugs, or like we're going to learn today, excessive eating. Now I know that your mother told you that it is a mitzvah lo aseh, that it is a mitzvah d'oraita, that you must finish the gigantic bowl of plof that's in front of your face, and if you don't, who knows what's going to happen to you? Some horrible, horrifying stuff. However, the mitzvah bal tashchit, how do you say it? Bal tashchit, yeah. That you shouldn't waste food actually comes with the cooker, not the eater. She shouldn't make so much food for you, more than is humanly capable of eating. Not on you, so you don't have to eat it. Although I know your grandma's going to get upset. So you're going to have to figure that one out for yourself. And Hibota, dude, how are you going to squirm through that one? But the basic understanding is like this, that I used to eat like crazy. And obviously when people saw me, they would never think so because I was usually relatively thin. But I would eat all the time, all day, all night. I was eating to the extent that when I was with my friends and let's say like their parents took me out for dinner, I would not just eat my plate. I would also eat their son's plate. And the parents very much liked me because of that, because you know Jewish parents don't like leftovers. So I always just thought, okay, so I like to eat. It's not a big deal. However, then I entered into the world of Rabbi Nachman. And I found out that excessive eating or eating beyond, let's say, what is satiating you, or eating just for the sense of wanting it to taste good, not because it's actually beneficial to you in some way, physically or spiritually, can be very, very, very damaging. Rabbi Nachman once said, and obviously this goes very much against modern science, but Bezrat Hashem one day we'll see the truth. And he said that many more people have died from eating too much than eating nothing or not enough. Meaning, sometimes we think to ourselves, but I didn't eat so much today, or I only had like one meal, or I only had a little bit to eat. And then everybody says, you're going to get sick, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. So Rabbi Nachman says, you're going to be fine. The real sicknesses, and obviously we know to some extent when it comes to obesity, actually come from overeating. However, we understand from Rabbi Nachman that the greatest illness does actually not come from being overweight, as modern medical science says, but it's the actual act of overeating, not what happens after the fact. Does everybody understand the distinction? Sorry, I feel bad. He threw his food away. Don't tell your parents after that your Ashkenazi rabbi came and now you're not eating all this stuff in front of your face. I'm gonna get in big trouble. It's okay? Okay, thank you. So it's eating, and that is what? What is the connection between eating and the fact that this is the month of being able to connect to the tzaddik, who is the Eitz HaChaim, like we're learning the tree of life in a deeper way this month than we can the rest of the year? I could understand if this was the month of the Brit, this is the month of Tefillah, this is the month of who knows what. What does eating have to do with connecting to the tzaddik? Both the actual tzaddik and the tzaddik within ourselves. So in one simple sense, there's a pasuk which Shlomo Melech says, and that is that a tzaddik eats to satisfy his soul. Meaning that Shlomo Melech, who's the smartest man who ever lived, he knew everything. He comes out and he says, what's the real difference between, let's say, a tzaddik and someone who's not a tzaddik? A person who has achieved mastery in the area of spirituality and a person who has not yet reached that level. And he says there's one fundamental difference, that the tzaddik eats to satisfy his soul. Meaning, he is not eating for physical reasons. He's eating for spiritual reasons. That I'm not eating because the food tastes good. I'm eating in order that I should have spiritual sustenance. That I should be able to do as much good for those people around me and myself with this koach, with this energy that comes from the food. That's why I'm eating the food. And on a very deeper level, in Kabbalah, they explain that in the beginning of creation, there were, so to speak, sparks of godliness which fell from what was called Shvirat HaKelim. There was a breaking of the vessels, that Hashem sent light through these vessels that he created, or these worlds that he created. They shattered, they broke, and they fell down to lower levels. The Arizal teaches, the greatest Kabbalist who ever lived, that the majority of those sparks fell into food. This is the real reason why we get such hana from food, why we get some pleasure from food. It's not just because food tastes good. It's actually more so to do with the fact that there's more sparks of godliness in the food than there is in any other entity. And that's why we crave it so much. Because on paper, it doesn't really make sense. If I'm already satiated, I already ate everything that I needed. Why should I continue eating, even to the point of getting sick? So obviously, we understand that there is some Yetzer Hara type of stuff going on here. But there's also the fact that there's sparks of godliness that are trapped within food. There's many stories from Hasidic masters about this, from Kabbalistic masters about this. Suffice it to say that when the tzaddik eats, Rabbi Nachman says, he's getting all of his sustenance from the light of the letters which are in the food. What does this mean? Bezrat Hashem, one day I will know and I will get back to you on that one. I don't know yet. However, on a simple level, we understand that Kabbalistically, where is the light of sparks of godliness which fell? They are comprised of the Hebrew letters, the 22 Hebrew letters. So to speak, all of the letters are now trapped in the food. If you'll notice, how many teeth do you have in your mouth? You don't have any. You should probably go to the dentist because you're very young for that. Let's see, open up. Oh, I saw them. He's lying through his teeth. Witty pun. Everyone like that one. Okay. How many teeth do you have? 32. 32. Okay. How many years did Yaakov have to work and toil for Lavan that he was getting screwed over left and right? 14. Add 8. 22. 22. No, it's good. It's good. I like how you're jumping. It was good. 22. How many years was Joseph disconnected from his family from the time that he was sold into slavery to the time that he was released from prison, became king, and ultimately when his family came down during the famine? How many years? 22 years. Why were they both for 22 years? Because there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. because it's taught in Kabbalah and Chassidut that they were both rectifying all 22 letters. That was corresponding to the 22 years. Because for you to reach Emunah, Rabbi Nachman says you need to rectify speech. Speech is the Hebrew letters. There's 22 of them. However, we understand from Kabbalah that when Hashem created the world, he spoke the world into existence using Lashon HaKodesh. So how many letters are in Lashon HaKodesh? 22. But we also know that there's 10 Sfirot. What's 10 plus 22? 32. So your 32 teeth represent the 10 Sfirot and the 22 letters of creation. Think about that as you're chomping on your shashlich when you get home. No? Not going to do that? Okay. Also, we know that in Kabbalah it said that there's 32 gates of wisdom. Chokhmah. This is also corresponding to the 32 teeth. There's a very deep thing going on with the teeth. Also, in Kabbalah it's explained that the entire tikkun, rectification for every single one of us and the whole world in general is through a process which the Arizal, Rabbi Nachman, referred to as birur. Birur means to extract. That these sparks of godliness which have fell into different things, and we know that the majority of them, or the most intense concentration of them are in food, how do you get them out of the food? They need to be extracted. How are they extracted from the food? By chomping on them. Through the grinding of the teeth, these 32, so to speak, channels of wisdom, you draw out the sparks of godliness which are hidden in the food. Okay. But now we have to understand. Obviously, we're saying that in some level, how does a person show he has achieved complete spiritual mastery? When he gets to the point that he can eat literally just to satiate his soul, not for physical needs. So that's obviously a very high level. But we're saying in a deeper way that what is our whole avoda for this month? What should we be working towards? That is connecting to the Eitz HaChaim. That is connecting to the Tzadi. Did you ever notice sometimes that you try and show people Rabbi Nachman, and they're not so excited about it? They're not as on fire for it as you are. They're not as interested as you are. So Rabbi Nachman says in Yud Zayin of Likutei Moharan something very interesting. He says that the light of the tzaddik is reflective of the light of the Or Panim, the light of Hashem's face, is reflected through the tzaddik himself, this spiritual master. And what happens, he says, is that if a person is fallen and sunken into overeating, or he's eating in a sense of taiva, just for his desire, then what ends up happening is it causes his consciousness to go into exile. If you ever notice, when was the beginning of the galut of existence? When was the beginning of the exile of consciousness in the world? With Adam HaRishon and Chava in the garden, what did they do? They ate. Why are we learning about eating in the beginning? It's to show that in a very unusual way, not that you'd expect, that the faculty of eating, the act of eating, when not done in a way which is healthy, in a way which is paced, in a way which is without brachot, in a way with food which is not kosher if you're Jewish, then what ends up happening is it actually causes your mind, says Rabbi Nachman, to be jumbled and confused. And specifically, that it goes into exile. Your consciousness leaves you. This is why you'll notice often that, let's say you feel really good. You just did like a fire hippotadude, okay? Or let's say you learned something and it really inspired you. And then you go home and you eat a big meal and you lose the fire. Why'd you lose the fire? Because fire, Rabbi Nachman says, comes from the running of the mind. The running of the mind that comes from God consciousness. However, what cools down that, and so to speak, puts it into hiding, is eating in a way which is not called spiritual. Eating in a way which is purely physical. And in this way, Rabbi Nachman says, you could literally be standing in front of the tzaddik of the entire generation, who in the final generation would be Mashiach, and you would have no idea, for one reason, only because of the type of eating. the desire for eating. Obviously, when I saw this, it was a big buzzkill, considering the fact that I struggled so much with eating, especially at night. Oh my gosh. Very difficult challenge. Even more so for me, that even though Rabbi Nachman says that the greatest challenge for every man in his life is the Brit, is sexual purity, for me, it's been a bigger challenge with eating. However, it does connect somewhat to the fact that Adam HaRishon was blemished in the area of eating, in the mouth. And we know that the greatest rectification comes for Adam at the end. Meaning that, so to speak, everybody in our generation is connected to the mouth. And that's the reason why Mashiach is our tzaddik of our generation. Because it says in the Tikkuni Zohar, which Sephardim say every day for breakfast, that Malchut Peh, that Malchut, kingship, meaning Mashiach, is the mouth. Rabbi Nachman says that Mashiach is going to have to spend his whole life rectifying and uplifting and elevating his prayer until it's perfect. And only once his prayer is perfect is he going to use that prayer to come and overcome all of the challenges which face the Jewish people at the end of time. So now if we understand that where is the rectification of prayer coming from? What is it that's going to give the person the ability to pray with such intensity, such fervor, such consciousness, that I'm able to awaken changes in the physical world, even changes of, let's say, pandemic viruses which have swept over, or let's say subjugation of the nations against the Jewish people? It must be that that person had achieved a very high level of eating, and he would have to work on his eating his whole life. Now, it's very interesting because it says that there were a few souls in history that were not affected by the original sin of Adam HaRishon. One of those was Moshe Rabbeinu. Why was that? Because the Arizal teaches that he came from the front of the throat of Adam. And that part was not affected by the Nachash. However, there was one very great soul who was very affected, more affected than anybody in history. That is the soul of David. That the soul of Mashiach is actually caught and trapped in the klipot more than any other soul in history. This is the deep reason why the Christians have gotten the idea of a suffering servant. That there's, so to speak, some type of spiritual master who suffers tremendously in his life for everybody else. The real reason why this figure is suffering so much is because in the beginning of history, his soul was trapped in the klipot deeper than any other soul. And therefore, his revelation can only come about at the end because we need to first do birur. We need to extract all the sparks of godliness from the klipot before Mashiach can reveal himself. So therefore, David can only reveal himself to the world at the end once that's accomplished. Now, there is a piece which I remember reading where Rabbi Nachman says like this: there are people who sleep away all their days. Some of them have fallen into sleep because of their desires or because of things that they have done, which the Torah says not to. There are other cases of people who they possess genuine goodness. They truly are good people, and they actually have amazing beauty of character. But their fall came about only through achila, food. That Rabbi Nachman says that there are some people that have achieved tremendous levels, both in the area of midot, how they act, how they behave, in their learning, in their teaching, in their praying, that person, if he's still blemished in the area of eating, that he could sleep his whole life away. And that all of his Torah learning is, so to speak, Torah learning, which is not true Torah learning. That his teaching is not true teaching. That his tefillah is not true tefillah. All because of one thing, this issue with achila. Rabbi Nachman says elsewhere that there are three main things which get in the way of a Jew actually having real Yirat Hashem, real Emunah. These three taivas are for jangi, for money. Number one, That Rabbi Nachman says any person who is running after money will never have a emunah in Hashem. Okay? Number two, a person is running after sex. Rabbi Nachman says he also will never have a emunah in Hashem because this is a blemish of the Brit. And we know that Rabbi Nachman teaches that for a person to have a emunah, it's dependent on his level of sexual purity. What's the third one? And this is the curveball. He says the taiva for eating. That as long as a person is entrenched in their taiva for eating, they will never have real yira of Hashem. Okay? So obviously, this is something which on paper shouldn't be such a big issue. We have so many things that from a secular perspective are a problem that we're dealing with. And let's say we even go spiritual, that seems much worse. However, we have something which is rather parv, like eating. That Rabbi Nachman seems to be saying that even though obviously in Hashem's eyes it's not worse than those other things. However, for a person who's trying to achieve closeness to Hashem, it's equal of a barrier as, let's say, wasting seed. That you cannot see the tzaddik, that the tzaddik is standing in front of you. He's giving you your Eitzer you need. He's giving you the Torah that you need. He's literally giving you everything that you need. And because of this one reason, you cannot lift up and out because of the taiva for achila. Rabbi Nachman says, where do you see this in the Torah? And this is an unbelievable thing he says in Likutei Moharan. You'll notice Yosef, who is Yosef? He represents that tzaddik, right? That he's the archetypal tzaddik, that we call him Yosef HaTzaddik. Who was he put into prison by? Paro. And who were the people that he was hanging out in prison? Who was in prison with him? And who kept him there after because they didn't mention Yosef's name? That was the bread steward and the wine steward. Rabbi Nachman says, did you notice that they all have to do with food? That Paro, if you flip the letters around, it's Oref. That's the back of the neck. And we know in Kabbalah, it's explained that all sparks of Kedusha are in the front of the neck, which we just said before is connected to Moshe. And all sparks of Kedusha, which are trying to be trapped, are from the back of the neck. That's from Paro. That's the Oref. That's why it said to Yehuda, that Yaakov said to Yehuda, that your hand is always going to be on the Oref of your enemies. And Rashi says this is referring to David, meaning to Mashiach at the end. That he is going to be taking care of the enemies of the Jewish people, meaning the Oref, which if you flip the letters around is Paro. We know that Paro never actually died at the Yam Suf. That all the other Mitzrim died, but Chazal say that Paro survived. That we're still dealing with him. And only David at the end will be able to take care of him. He's the back of the neck. Where does food go down? Here. The Oref. Where does it go into? So Rabbi Nachman explains that the bread steward and the wine steward, they each represent different organs in your digestive system. One is your stomach. I think one is your esophagus. I have to go back and check it. But either way, it's very interesting. Why? Why is it that the people who are with Yosef in prison all have to do with food? Because we're learning that Yosef the tzaddik, he is kept in prison from the Jewish people as long as we are sunk in the desire for food. One last piece. Rabbi Nachman says that as long as a person is still struggling with his eating, he will always have people who are causing him problems. People who are giving him difficulties, causing him a lack of peace in his life. What does struggling with your eating have anything to do with other people causing you problems? They seem completely unrelated. So now listen to this. In Kabbalah, it's explained that the sphera which is connected to shalom, peace, is what's called yesod. We know that in Kabbalah, the tzaddik is corresponding to the sphere of yesod. So we understand that who is the harbinger of peace? The tzaddik. That he is called shalom. He's called peace. Now, Rabbi Nachman says, why can't you see the light of that tzaddik even if he's standing right in front of you? Or maybe you do connect him to some level, but he's not helping you. And he says it's because you're sunken in the taiva for achila. Why? Because Rabbi Nachman explains that for a person to have peace in their life, they must first have inner peace. That there's no way for a person to experience peace outside of himself, from those around him, unless he first has inner peace. Because Chazal teach that everything you see outside of yourself is a reflection of what's going on inside of you. So if you see external chaos, it must mean that there is inner chaos. So Rabbi Nachman teaches that as long as a person is being driven and all of his decisions are being filtered through his taiva for achila. What am I going to do now? Depends where I eat tonight. What am I going to do for breakfast? What am I going to do for lunch? What am I doing in my day? It's all revolving around where I'm going to eat. This is how I grew up. That every day it's about what's the next meal? What's the next meal? What's the next meal? What does that person not feel in his life? Peace. So Rabbi Nachman says the only way that a Jew can feel peace is if he rectifies and elevates his desire for eating to something spiritual. And until then, he will always feel an inner state of chaos. And now we can understand why is it that a person can only attach themselves to find hikashrut or connection or geula from a real tzaddik in his life when he has obtained mastery in his eating, because then he has obtained inner peace. And when a person has obtained inner peace, now he can see the person who's called peace, shalom, the tzaddik. And until that point, he can't perceive peace because he doesn't have peace. Does everybody understand that? So in this month, we have a very specific, very, very big tikkun. That we know that each of the different months are corresponding to different spiritual faculties, different sfirot. We know that this month is a very big month because of the 10 sfirot, the highest one is called Keter, the crown. This is the highest faculty of a Jew. It's called the unknowable head in Kabbalah. What does it mean, the unknowable head? It doesn't mean that it's very hard to figure out. It means it's inherently unknowable. That even if you know it, what you'll know is that you don't know. Rabbi Nachman used to say, my teachings are so secret that even when I reveal them, they're still a secret. What does that mean? I don't know. Ani lo yodea. That's good. If you know, it means you don't have Keter. Because Keter, which is the highest level of consciousness, is the level of not knowing, because knowing itself is a limitation. Okay? Now, within the level of Keter, even though we don't know the essence of it, we do know that it's, so to speak, split up into 3 heads. It has 3 different heads. The 3 heads from lower to higher, the lowest is called Ratzon, will. This is corresponding to the month of Adar, which is coming up. Okay, Ratzon is corresponding to the month of Adar. This is the month that Moshe was born and passed away in. We know he had a very strong Ratzon. We know that it's also corresponding to Yosef, because when Adar splits into 2 months, it becomes Ephraim and Menashe, which are Yosef's sons. Yosef is the tzaddik. He obviously also had a very strong Ratzon. This is all the month of Adar. However, we have the month of Shvat. This is actually corresponding to a level higher than Ratzon. What is higher than a person's Ratzon? Pleasure, ecstasy. That in Kabbalah, it's explained that there is a level of the Keter, the crown, which is called pleasure. And this pleasure is even higher than your Ratzon. It's even higher than your will. This is, so to speak, manifested in food in a very low way, but in a very high way, there is something called spiritual ecstasy. It's not what happened when you went to your friend's concert and somebody slipped you something. That was not the type of ecstasy that the Kabbalah is explaining. It's talking about a spiritual ecstasy. That if you ever saw a real tzaddik on Shabbat, you would think that they literally were in a different world. It's because they are. They're in a world that's called Shabbos. The place of Shabbat, what's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is Oneg Shabbat. Why is it Oneg? Oneg means ecstasy, pleasure. You have a mitzvah to literally feel ecstasy on Shabbat. Why? Because we know Shabbat is Keneged Olam Haba, the world to come. And the place of ecstasy is that place, if you make it. Okay? So therefore, when do we have an ability to tap into that spiritual ecstasy right now without it being physical? That's if we rectify our eating during this month. Because rectified eating leads to tasting that spiritual pleasure that's called oneg. What is the highest level of keter? Higher than will, higher than pleasure. This is the highest thing in the entire soul, that it rises above all of existence. Can anybody guess? Emunah. Emunah. That this is corresponding to the month of Nisan, the tribe of Yehuda, when we are freed from exile and we have Geula. This is coming up right after Adar. So we see that all three heads, says Sefer Yetzirah, the first Kabbalistic text, they're all from month to month to month. And we go from Shvat to Adar. They're actually they're actually corresponding to the three heads of the Keter. We're trying to rectify all of them starting this month. Anybody have any questions from tonight's lesson? Maybe how to practically implement any of the things that we spoke about? Yeah, Mike. So you should be, first of all, there's no way to attain anything which is difficult without prayer, Rabbi Nachman says. So you must pray in your hibodedut to Hashem, help me to be able to achieve tikkun in my achila, that I should achieve higher level eating, rectification in my eating, that I eat for my soul. It's not about eating a lot. It's about why you're eating.
So basically you're trying to say that the reason why I'm eating is...
I'm not telling you why you're eating. You tell us why you're eating. Right. Right. So that's one level, but there's a higher level in that. That it literally nourishes your soul. Not even that I use this for physical energy to go do mitzvot. That is obviously a higher level than most of us are aware of. But even that itself has a higher level. And the higher level is that the tzaddik eats to nourish his soul, meaning literally when he eats, he experiences higher levels of revelation of Hashem. Rabbi Nachman says when a person is rectified his eating, he literally can achieve the keter of his soul when he comes to eat. That he will experience this high, intense desire for Hashem that he doesn't have the rest of the day when he comes to eat. But this is only after he has rectified his eating. Rabbi Nachman also says elsewhere, you can get to such a level in your eating that no matter what you're eating, it could taste like whatever you want it to. That would obviously save us a lot of money. But we know that they were very big tzaddikim, and on Shabbat they didn't have a lot of money. And they used to talk about how delicious the steak was when really all they had was beans. So either they were delusional or they had reached such a state of consciousness that they could actually taste the food that they wanted to. But this only came with tremendous elevation of their eating. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Yes, we'll go this side, we'll come back.
Rabbeinu.
1 second, David. There's other people questions. We're going to get you at the end.
All right.
Thank you. On Shabbat is different. You have a neshama yetera. An extra level of your soul comes down on Shabbat for every Jewish person. For that reason, when you eat on Shabbat, you won't go to sleep from the eating. You can still be spiritually high even if you have a very joyous festive meal. And obviously from Chazal and Rabbi Nachman himself, that they say that it's important that you deck out your table as much as possible. So Shabbat is not the time, so to speak, where this is most in play. This is most in play during the week. However, obviously on Shabbat as well, we want to be able to eat in a way, even though let's say we eat better or we have more delight and we have better food and better wine, all these things, that we still don't eat in a way that I'm not doing this for any reason above the physical act of eating itself. Although during Shabbat you have like a higher level of protection because you have a higher level of your soul. You are. Yeah, so you're supposed to enjoy it in a physical way, but the reason why it's a mitzvah only on Shabbat to enjoy the food in a physical way on Shabbat is because there you don't run the risk of that physical eating putting you into a state of sleep. So you should enjoy, but in general, Rabbi Nachman says the cause of all of a person suffering in his life comes from excess. Whether it's from food, whether it's from excessive thinking, whether it's from excessive pleasure, whether it's from excessive Netflix, whether it's from excessive Facebook and Instagram browsing, whether it's from excessive anything. Anything excessive, Rabbi Nachman says, is the cause of all suffering in the world. This is the deep reason why, what is the first mitzvah that a Jewish boy does? They have the Brit Milah, which is that they remove the excess level of the most intense pleasure area of the person. Why are we doing that as the very first mitzvah? To teach that all good in your life is going to come when you perform a Brit Milah on everything in your life. That I achieve and I experience the essence or the ikr of each thing, and I throw away the peel. By the way, just as a few side notes, practical, Rabbi Nachman says a few very interesting things which you should take note of. Rabbi Nachman says, very bad idea to eat raw garlic and onions. If it's cooked, it's okay. If it's raw, he says, anybody who tells you it's good for you is, I'm not going to say the language that he says, but the basic idea is that he says it's very, very bad for you. And not only does it not give you life force, it sucks your life force from you. Raw onions and raw garlic. My wife knows because now everywhere we go, I'm like picking out onions at my salad or like asking the chef that he should take it out. Obviously, it goes beyond scientific reasons, although maybe eventually science will bear this out. However, it gets to a point with Rabbi Nachman where you see that everything he says is true to the extent that the things that I don't understand, it would be arrogant of me to say like, no, I'm not going to do this because this doesn't make sense when everything else he says works. This probably works also. So anyway, that's a practical thing to help your eating. Another thing, which is also very undercover, Rabbi Nachman has a whole Torah dedicated to this in Likutei Moharan. He says it's very bad for your neshama that you eat a fruit that is not completely ripe yet. Don't eat unripened fruit. You know, let's say you get a banana and you see it's still green. He says, do not eat it. Because spiritually, he says, it will take life force from you. It doesn't give it to you. And he says, in addition to that, the food that you eat that it is okay, it actually gets trapped along with that food as well. So therefore, what's the basic premise? When it comes to fruit, just make sure the fruit is ripe. Rabbi Nachman does say if it happens to not be ripe, you have to eat it. He says then you should be very, very careful when you make a bracha, when you do the blessing before you eat and after, that you do it with tremendous intention beforehand. This itself will protect you from the negative consequences of eating food which is not ripened yet. But the basic understanding is because Kabbalistically, anything which has a peel is connected to a klipa. A klipa in spirituality is representative of the negative forces which block you off from good, from godliness in your life. That's the reason why Jewish boys, they get a haircut when they're 3 years old. Because a tree in the Torah, you cannot use it, the fruit from it, except after 3 years. This is called the laws of Orla. Why can't you use it the first 3 years? Because, so to speak, it's not ready to be eaten yet, not just physically, but also spiritually. Any other questions? You're welcome.
Rabbeinu.
1 second, David. I'm gonna call you out. I'm not gonna forget you. Yeah.
All right.
Sure. So Rabbi Nachman says that whenever you have people around you who are causing you trouble, like that you have strife in your life, whenever you have strife in your life from others, Rabbi Nachman says it's because you have inner strife. So he says, where is inner strife coming from? He says it comes from your taiva of achila, that from your desire for eating that you have not rectified. So as a result of that, because it's constantly eating away at you, no pun intended. So as a result of that, you don't have inner peace, and that reflects itself outside of you through strife and divisiveness.
Ruben, see you later.
Any other questions?
So for less of a spiritual day that a person has and he eats throughout that day. So that's to that extent that he's taken away from spirituality.
Yeah, Rabbi Nachman says that your eating throughout the day should be at the very least motivated for a higher reason than just because it tastes good. Or surviving or because it tastes good. That ultimately, at the very least, the reason you should be eating is that you draw nourishment so that you can do better things with your life, so that you can do mitzvot. And then obviously at higher levels, that you actually derive from the sparks of godliness which are hidden in the food themselves. This comes later on. So what would be a basic way, so to speak, to make it that when you eat your food, you have the best chance within the act of eating itself, not just not overeating, by eating slowly, by eating mindfully, by chewing the food many, many times before you actually swallow it, instead of just swallowing it. Rabbi Nachman says that a person that he eats slowly, as if, so to speak, he's with somebody very important, how would he eat in front of that person? If he eats like that all the time, even when nobody's around him, he says, ashrei to that person and what they're going to experience in their life. Okay? So, and you can experience this very easily. Even when a person fasts, why do we fast on very high spiritual days? Because food itself can throw a person into exile. It can throw the tzaddik inside of you into prison, just like Yosef was thrown into prison by the butcher and the baker and Paro. Any other questions?
Yeah, what does it mean when you can't eat? Like when you have a lack of appetite, there's a problem with overeating. What about undereating?
Rabbi Nachman does not see undereating as a problem. He would obviously see like psychological disorders, like the names are escaping me right now. What? Anorexia, bulimia. This he would not say is a good idea for you to have this, but the basic understanding is very simple. Okay, I'll explain it like this. The quality of Yesod, which is the quality of the tzaddik, the Brit, is corresponding to one of the names of Hashem. All the different sfirot correspond to a different name. The name of Hashem that corresponds to the Yesod or the tzaddik is the name Shin Dalad Yud. She, die. We have this on every mezuzah. We have this on the tefillin, the shin on each side. Why is that corresponding to Yesod? Because the Midrash, Chazal taught thousands of years ago that when Hashem created the world, it kept expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding, just, so to speak, like the Big Bang Theory says about how the world was created. And ultimately, Hashem, through the name Shakai, Shin Dalad Yud, it comes from the word shed die, that he said die, enough. That in Hebrew, die means enough. That because he said enough to the world, meaning he stopped the world from expanding and he created boundaries for the world. As a result of that, the world became a habitable place. That prior to this, because the world didn't stop expanding, there was nowhere for us to live, to experience life. We needed that the world itself stopped expanding and formed into boundaries so that we can actually live in a space. Does that make sense? Okay. So this all comes from the name Shakai. So now Rabbi Nachman teaches you can connect to this experience of the tzaddik, which is Shakai, in every area of your life. Meaning, whenever I say die to anything physical, enough, that I only engage in it as much as my body actually needs and not more than that, then you draw blessing from Shakai, which is the tzaddik, or Hashem, the name of Hashem, which connects to it, which is connected to the concept of shalom, peace. Okay? So very, very simply, when I eat whatever I'm eating, or when I do whatever I'm doing that's physical, if I do the physical act to the degree that I need it and not more, this is where all blessing comes into you from, spiritual and physical. But once I go beyond what my body actually needs, then it is the sources of negativity, the forms of impurity or klipot, which then draw sustenance after that. And then it's not good for you. It actually takes not only The extra part, Rabbi Nachman says it takes all the good part that you had up until that point as well. And by the way, this is a very hard thing to do. When you go home after this, you're not all going to be like masters of cuisine. However, just to have it in the back of your mind that there's such a thing and that maybe it's affecting me and I didn't realize it, just to keep note of it. And obviously that this month we have a perpetuous ability to work on this thing. So to have it in mind and to pray to Hashem that you should be able to achieve a higher level of eating. And obviously there's levels. And the more that you grow in your eating, the more sensitive you will be to spirituality. The more sensitive you'll be to spirituality, the more you're going to be able to find Yeshua in your life. Okay? David, last question of the night goes to you.
Rabbeinu, like, again, like you said, like if a person does eating physically and doing things physically on the Shabbat table, it brings more blessing, right?
Yes.
It brings more berachot.
Yes, brings more brachot.
So I'm trying also to say also the point of Shabbat is like Shabbat Menucha. The point of Menucha means that Hashem rested on the seventh day.
Right. That's right. But we see that Hashem only rests on the day of Shabbat, meaning the day of spiritual elevation. Then you're at peace. And then you can eat with pleasure. I want to just add very last thing. Tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem, I plan on going to Florida, to Miami, for our third National Tzion speaking tour. We were in Chicago and Detroit, thank God. We were in the great state of New Jersey with tremendous smells that come in north when you come down in. And now we're going to Florida. I'm doing a class with Gedalia Fenster on Tuesday night. And I also, Bezrat Hashem, plan hopefully to have a class with the owner and the originator and starter of the Lighthouse Project, who is that's the place where Gedalia teaches his classes. The one who owns it, he actually teaches the Likutei Moharan and has a chabur as well in Miami. And Bezrat Hashem, I hope to be able to teach with him as well Wednesday night while I'm there. If you guys plan on being in Florida and you want to come, everyone's welcome. If you wanted a reason to go anyway, and you want to get out of the state of New York for a little bit, you have a reason to go that's spiritual, that's also good. We'd love to have you there. If not, I think that it says on the Gedalia's flyer that it's going to be streaming on Facebook Live. So I don't know how to use that, but if you guys know, you can figure it out. If you have any questions about how to get to the class, you can email us. And if there's anything specific that you want us to discuss, so just send me an email at cmbreslaproject@gmail.com. I can't guarantee that's what we're going to speak about, but I definitely could discuss it with Gedalia and see. Okay? Everybody have an amazing, amazing week. I wish you a lot of hatzlacha in working on your eating. And hopefully it helps you get closer and closer to Hashem.
Rabbeinu, you understand what I'm saying? Like what I just told you?
We got it. We're good to go.
Like on the
Have a
seventh
great
day,
night.